We have time. Okay.
Yeah, we'll do a roll call vote. Roll call in a second.
7:15.
Okay, so pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, GLC 30A, subsection 18, and the governor's March 15th, 2020 order imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting of the Southborough Municipal Technology Committee will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and or parties with the right and or requirement to attend this meeting can be found at the town of Southborough's website at www.southboroughtown.com. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch or participate in the meeting may do so in the following manner by finding the meeting at www.southboroughtown.com/remote meetings. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on Southborough's website an audio or video recording transcript or other comprehensive recording of the proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting, I believe, as well as YouTube. Okay, so let's start with, it looks like it's 7:17. We will call the meeting to order. And the roll call, we need a roll call of basically present and go through your name. So Will Warren.
Aye.
Larry Sandberg.
Hello.
And Tom LaFemme.
Present.
Okay. First thing we want to do is do review of the minutes. And so I forwarded the minutes from the previous meeting prior to this. Let me pull those up. Okay. So I'll share my screen. This is minutes from the 21st of January meeting. So I don't know if anybody has any questions. Or had a chance to review these, but I think we need to, for everything here, like, because this is online, we need to do everything but for motion and roll call vote. So do I have a motion to approve the minutes from the 21st of January meeting?
I probably shouldn't move that, but I'll second it.
Okay, so typically you need, I think, a motion and then a second, and then I think we probably have to do a roll call vote to approve. Okay.
That's correct.
Will Warren, do you vote to approve meeting minutes?
Well, you're currently mute.
Right. We still need a motion and a second. Did you move it, Matt?
So I think we need a motion and a second to first approve,
Mm-hmm.
and then I think there's a discussion, and then there's the actual approval of the minutes as written. So I think there's like 2 roll call votes. Is that correct, Tom?
I believe. That
You're on
sounds,
mute now.
That's correct.
I should be unmuted now as well.
Yep,
There we
you
go.
are. Okay, so do we have, let's start again. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes from 21st of January?
I move. This is
Okay,
Will.
do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. And we now need to have a roll call vote for this. Is that correct, Tom? Okay.
Oh, now we just have a discussion.
Have a discussion and then,
And then we
okay.
call a question and approve the minutes either as they are or as amended.
Okay, so any discussion? It's quite comprehensive minutes. I don't have any questions myself.
You can call the question.
Okay, I'll call the question. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes as written?
Oh, you have the motion. All
You have the motion.
Okay, all right. So
All in
roll
favor
call
of
vote.
approving them?
All in favor of approving the minutes as written? Will Warren,
I approve.
Larry Sandberg,
I approve.
and myself, I approve. Okay, so the minutes are approved as written. Okay, first thing on our agenda for this meeting is just COVID-19 risk mitigation via technology. Obviously, the town has done, love to get an update from Tom on the things that Tom himself has done, as well as things he's seen across town about how employees, departments, et cetera, are dealing with the situation.
Okay. So I've done a number of things to allow for work from home environment at this point. First thing I did was, when this was first coming out, was upgraded 50 of our Office 365 licenses to allow for OneDrive access for key employees. Basically, I looked and identified those people that would have file access needs. So that was kind of my tier 1 immediate response. Since then, we've enabled VPN access for 24 additional users through our firewall provider. And that's only on town-owned laptops. I'm not installing VPN on any personal devices or anything like that, because we don't have control over antivirus and patch management. So that was kind of a decision that I made at that point. Along with that, I distributed the small fleet of loaner laptops that I maintain, which is I believe 3 or 4 of them. And then the schools graciously loaned us 10 Chromebooks that were available. So I have 3 of those out right now. So we have a fairly good presence for people to be able to do their work from home. From organizational, obviously we established a 2-host Zoom account so that we can hold 2 meetings at one time. Initially, it was just regular Zoom meetings, but then there was definitely the appetite for public participation and trying to look at how to do that safely and avoid the concept of Zoom bombing. So we upgraded one of the hosts to be webinar, which is what we're in now. So it does allow the public to interact potentially live when if you open up for public comment. People can raise their hand and you can recognize them. Again, this is the more secure way to do that. I've had maybe 2 times now since all this started that I've had 2 committees that would really like to have public comment at the same time. And my commitment has been that if conflicts continue to happen and we can't work around scheduling, then I would recommend to the town that we maybe look at increasing our webinar capability. But as it stands right now, I don't think we're in that situation. As I told Matt before, to date, we have had a total of 40 virtual meetings of Boardy committee members, Boardy committees. A couple of those were administrative as well, but and then counting this meeting and going forward, we have an additional 14 that are on the books already. So, so I think it was a very good investment in resources, and I do think that this is going to be at least some component of public engagement going forward. Another piece of technology that we quickly adopted was DocuSign, particularly for accounts payable and payroll warrants. So the town accountant and the town administrator don't have to physically be in the same space to be able to sign those documents, but that will also be open for other documents if we have contracts and things that need to be signed.
Just repeat, please. What were the 2 things that DocuSign was added for?
Accounts payable and the payroll warrants. So basically, the accountant can prepare what is going out for payments, but that needs to be authorized with signatures as well. Okay.
What going back to something you said earlier, I apologize for interrupting, but tell me about VPN. What are people using VPN for? What services are they accessing?
Yep. So the assessor's service is on our local network. Some users are using it just for file shares. So I mentioned I did OneDrive, but that was really initially as personal drives. So we call them the H drives. But we also have shared drives within the departments. And in the amount of time that trying to get this all set up, I didn't move any shared drives for permission. So there are some people that do still need access to get to files in the shares, in the departmental shares. And then police and fire can use them to get onto their internal system as well.
What is it's part of our agreement on our Office 365 licensing. What does the OneDrive licensing look like? Do we have, is it a cap of a quota per individual? Do we also have a pool that we can use to effectively replicate the share concept?
No, so it's per user. I think it's a terabyte per user, but we can certainly set up shares within that. For example, the capital committee that just formed, they were looking for a place to store files for the committee, and what I ended up doing was I created a share folder on the treasurer's account, because he's really the staff liaison to that committee. And then I granted permissions. The chair of the committee is the only one that has write access, but every member of the committee can read files that are there. And the only reason I did that was similar to what we've done with Google Drive here, is to prevent the inadvertent collaboration. Yeah. So, so and the nice thing is that with the OneDrive, the Office 365 licensing that I did upgrade to, we do have some new tools that are available to us when we do come back together too, including Teams and I forgot what they're changing the name of one of the products, I think, to Tasks, but it's really a project management type suite that again works great. Looks like it would work good for a team environment. I'm eyeing that as something that we can do for staff. Obviously, again, we have to be careful with rolling that out for boards and committees.
What are the Chromebooks being used for?
So right now, one of them is used again for file access. With the OneDrive access, you can actually have the online version of the Office suite. So again, that
really
was
how well is I'd be interested in knowing how well does online Office Suite work on a Chromebook?
It actually works pretty well. It's not bad. And then actually the public health nurse has a Chromebook at this point, because so that position, I don't know if you guys follow, but Leslie Chamberlain was the public health nurse, but she retired and she moved into more of a role with the Council on Aging as a nurse. And we have a new public health nurse. And the new public health nurse she has a desktop available at the office, and she's part-time. But given the current situation, a laptop was the preferred option, but we did not have any available to provide her at that point. So the next best option at no cost right now is the Chromebook. She is on my radar for July 1 funding, if, assuming all the funding goes through as planned, to upgrade her to a laptop. So we're prepared going forward as well.
In these online labs, do they have the equivalent of a Word and PowerPoint,
Yeah.
etc.?
Yeah, it's basically a full suite, which is kind of interesting.
Google Suite copy,
Yeah.
almost, right?
Yeah. Pretty much fully functional, I believe. I haven't really played with it that much, but it's certainly enough to do what you need to do to get some business done. So,
what do we know about Southborough Access Media? Have they effectively shut down during this time?
they are rebroadcasting the live streams of the meetings that they would typically cover. So, as it stands right now, I process the live stream, I download it and provide it in a drive for them to be able to rebroadcast.
So this meeting right now, of course, is being broadcast live, I think, on
Correct.
YouTube. And
Correct.
other platforms or just YouTube?
Just YouTube.
Okay.
And
And
that was
so-
just a logistical standpoint. Didn't want to complicate it too much.
And then you basically take it off of Zoom or YouTube, hand it over to Sam, Southborough Access Media, and then they'll broadcast it on
Correct.
cable.
Correct. Yep.
Interesting. All right. So which of the departments still have, obviously, physical people in place? I'm guessing clerks, the townhouse is still open, right?
No, townhouse is technically closed. Some people do still go in to do some work. I go down once a week, once every other week to, submit my payables and do any of the stuff that I can't do remotely. But generally speaking, the building is closed. Corderville Hall is closed. Library is closed. DPW and public safety are basically the buildings that have staff in them on a regular basis right now.
Okay. And any feedback on Zoom usage so far by boards and committees?
From what I've heard, it's been a pretty good success. There have been some concerns about public participation. I did see someone post that on my Southborough, but Beth did a really good job about correcting that statement very quickly. That meetings are available for public participation and public feedback. And I know that some committees have been hesitant just for the sheer fact that they've never been recorded to begin with. So the idea of being live is something a little bit different. There was also initially some pushback when the selectmen had some guidelines as to who could meet, about the concept of using just the town account. Why can't we use our personal Zoom accounts or our WebEx or whatever your chosen platform is.
Yeah.
And really my recommendation to the selectmen at that time was to keep it simple. Keep it to the one platform. because as you read, we do need to provide the account of the meeting by the order. So this is the easiest way to maintain that account. The clerk has to chase around minutes sometimes. I didn't want to be chasing around recordings, to post to the website. So, and like I said, generally speaking, I think I've had 2 glitches where the same host user logged into a meeting, a second meeting, so it bumped the first meeting off. But in both cases, we rectified that within minutes. So, out of 40 meetings, if I have 2 errors, I think that's a pretty good success.
Yeah. With it, have we integrated within Outlook? Have you tried out, or are you currently using the Zoom plugin for Outlook?
I just downloaded that the other day, so I have not been using it yet. In part, I have a kind of process that I'm going through, and it's forming that. I kind of have a mental checklist, and to disrupt that right now, I plan to try it. I just haven't had the courage to do it.
I think it works. I've used it day in and day out. It works well for the traditional Zoom meetings where you're sending a single link out to a lot of people. But this format where you're sending unique links out, and I don't think it has. I don't know if it has coverage for that sort of webinar.
Yeah, and the other piece of that is I'm not scheduling these in my personal calendar. I've created 2 meeting rooms for 2 meeting calendars. Sorry, for the resources. So
yeah.
On the positive side, it's getting people accustomed to using Outlook to schedule the meeting rooms. So
that's good.
Going
so once
forward,
we start moving back going
that.
forward, when we actually have physical meeting rooms, people will be familiar with how easy it is to do that.
Right.
Has any proposition been made to start scheduling town meeting rooms through Outlook as opposed to?
So we had started with the hearing room at Townhouse already. So that one was already live. Public safety training room was already live. I've since removed those as options because, I don't want people booking those.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think once we start opening buildings back up, my plan would be that that's part of the opening of the building.
That's great. And that includes the hearing room at the Townhouse, right?
Correct.
And so Carol in Selectman's office is on board on that?
Yeah.
That's great. Larry or Will, do you have any questions or comments? Do we have any questions? Looks like we have one attendee from the public.
Yeah, Sam.
Mr. Sam. Sam, do you have any questions or comments on this subject of COVID and technology? Feel free to raise your hand if you'd like to speak. The virtual hand. Guess not. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and move on with review the town email policy. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Tom, but it's basically this is something we want to review on a periodic basis, but especially now there's been a request or there's been some confusion, and you've made some clarifications.
Yeah. So the policy was approved by the selectmen, I think, back in 2018, and in there is language for annual review. And we missed it last year, but and it's coming to light because of this format of meeting that I'm only sending the invitations to southboroughma.com email addresses. I've had several requests to send to personal accounts, and my response has consistently been, I just can't manage 150 users who is choosing not to use their town resource. And through discussions, it has finally come out that there are some people that are concerned about the email policy and the language in that, including designating people as staff, board committee members as staff. So I committed to have it reviewed. It's going to be discussed, I believe, at the selectmen's meeting tomorrow. So I figured we can go through it. And if there's any updates, I did submit a couple clarifications or, just changes. If you want, I can share it and we can make changes as we go. If there's any language, or if you want to share it, Matt, that's fine.
Tom?
Yeah.
I have a question. I have put a rule in place in my town email that it forwards a copy of messages to my personal email. That's okay, right?
Yeah, so I actually put language in this today for that, because there are a fair number of people. I actually get alerted whenever someone sets up one of those rules, because it is it's under the data protection policies that I can put in place. And all it is, it's just an alert that someone has done it. And yes, my belief is that that is fine if you're using that to get notified that you have an email. But then if you are turning around to respond to that email, that should be done through the town account. That way there, it is archived. It's, it really is there to protect the town and board and committee members.
Yeah, that's what I do. I always use the town email for any responses or any messages. Actually, the other thing that I do is that as much as possible, I try and send emails from the town account to the town email of the person, but also to their personal email directly.
Okay.
Just simply so that I know that, people are not necessarily looking at it. And, that way I have some thought that they'll get my email, or at least they'll be able to ignore it in two places.
Yeah, the only issue with that is then you run into the responding from the personal one. But again, I think that's a training thing, and it's a changing of habits. So, again, the content of email is subject to all the same records retention as hard letters, hard memos, all that. So, there's the situations where, as a member of a board committee, you may serve for 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, whatever. And then for whatever reason, you either move out of town or other, and we've lost control of being able to respond to public records requests. So that's the foundation of the idea of using a town email address from my perspective. I had put this language together, compiling some different policies that I had found on other towns. I know there was a question of whether or not council had reviewed this or not. And to my recollection, I can't say one way or the other if he had. So I think, yep. Good.
I was just gonna, maybe you were planning to do it, but could you just go through and review the important changes, not the periods and commas, but,
No,
substantive.
I didn't. Yeah, the substantive change, the big one was in section 1 on definitions. I changed the word staff to municipal employee. And the reason for that, you don't have the track changes on there, Matt. So that might make it a little bit harder. But basically it had said staff refers to employees, elected and appointed board committee members, and paid or unpaid interns. Okay. And I changed it to the municipal employee and pulled the language directly from the conflict of interest law that you all have to do the training on and whatnot. So I thought that was a good way of making it concise. And really the reason I had chosen staff before was for the purpose of only having to write staff anywhere else in the policy and not saying, employees and, elected and appointed officials and all that. So, so again, that's one of them. I removed the definition for volunteers because it's covered under municipal employees. And then under section 4 again, I updated it to reflect municipal employees instead of just city staff.
Here's a lingering reference to staff.
Oh, okay. Email. Which one is that?
Just before 4.1.
Before 4.1. Yep. Okay. Thank you.
We can just do a search for staff in here.
Yeah, I thought I had done that, and
looks like there's a few more references.
Okay. There is one that was intentional. I know that.
Okay.
And this is why it's good to have peer review.
Cut and paste.
There we go.
I do have just a general question about this. So this is very, obviously, this policy is very specific, focused to email, but increasingly so, email is just one of the many components of the the suite of tools that town employees use to communicate with each other, collaborate. Same thing with boards and committee members. So could you remind me on what technology use policies? Do we have an overarching technology use policy, and then this is one of the sub-documents within it?
That again, so back in 2018, I had actually, I think it was 2017, I drafted a bunch of, I think 4 policies, and someone had asked for them to all be in one policy, and I tried to do it, and I couldn't make a single policy that would cover everything and was less than 50 pages. And that just didn't seem to make sense. So we are supposed to review those all annually. So so I would like to bring those forward, maybe one at a time or as a overall thing for one MTC meeting. Probably after town meeting at this point, but this one just came to the forefront as something that we needed to address sooner rather than later.
Sounds good. Yeah, I think that the main ones I'm thinking about are like the websites.
Yep.
Acceptable use policy for the websites, the board committee sites, as well as now as we're getting more into
social media,
Zoom, meetings,
just text messaging.
Yep.
Text messaging on town-owned accounts, etc.
It's interesting. My stockbroker just recently, within the last 2 or 3 weeks, notified me of a phone number. He has the requirement that all communications between him and his customers have to be saved for regulatory review.
Yeah.
And therefore, we've never, I've worked with this guy for about 20 years, but we've never texted each other. We send emails. And of course, as part of sending emails, he says, I have to at least say that I'm going to call you to confirm, because we're still supposed to be doing all of this by voice. But Raymond James has now set up some kind of recorded text messaging capability. So if I want to text to him, I have this number, and I can actually text things to that number, and he's allowed to respond to them, and it's all recorded for regulatory review and all of that. So I guess there is some new capabilities and some new technologies that are making that possible.
Yeah, there is some discussion going around about archiving text message, and again, it's a communication. So my advice on text message right now is don't do it. Basically, if it's town business, don't do it on text message. If it's hey, you need a coffee or something, that's one thing. But
does the firm does the town does the town have provide cell phones to employees with cell phone plans?
Some, yes.
Okay, some. So
some of them, yeah.
And on those plans, are the plans geared specifically towards governmental plans where there is some form of governance and
I mean, it's government pricing. I don't know that there's anything necessarily specific from Verizon that says that it's a government plan. I don't think they're any more responsive to, public records requests for text messages, let's say.
Huh. Yeah, because I know for that our Office 365 plans are those. I mean, it's a
Yes.
government plan, right? And it's geared to
Yes,
specifically
exactly.
around records requests and searchability and exposure, et cetera. Which leads me, I'm kind of very interested, especially as we move more towards cloud services like Teams, et cetera, whether each of those services has a particular component to them around how they retain version histories and searchability, et cetera.
Yep. So again, when I was rolling out OneDrive, I actually did a trial of Veeam has a Office 365 backup platform that will do OneDrive, it'll do SharePoint, things like that. So going forward, that's probably something I'm going to utilize, just so that we're not trusting solely Microsoft to do our backups for us, and make
So
sure
this is basically almost a reverse backup. We're talking about backing up the cloud to on-prem.
Yeah. Well, or then, back up the cloud to another cloud provider, so that,
Sure.
if someone deletes a file, because OneDrive does not necessarily, I have rules in place that you can't, that it won't permanent delete for a period of time, but I've gotten requests for 2 years ago, hey, where'd this file go? I changed this one, or I accidentally deleted it, so.
Yeah. And I see. I know. What, about a year ago or so, we were discussing a backup strategy, and we discussed even the possibility of, obviously, given the town owns some fiber, we have between the locations. I think that's being done right now. We also discussed the possible reciprocal arrangement between different towns.
Yep.
But now that we have quite a bit of OneDrive capacity, and maybe this is. Maybe it's distributed across a bunch of different individual unique accounts. Does that allow us to do backups to OneDrive?
It could. It could get a little messy.
How many? Right now we have 1 terabyte per
user.
User, and how many users?
50 users. So so the other issue though is that you have to be very careful to specify that a folder is cloud only. Otherwise you're going to chew up all the local storage as well. So OneDrive is kind of unique in that it's double storage like that, or triple if you log into another machine. So
it'll pull it all down.
Right. If you don't specify that you want it cloud only, except when you use it, it'll download it and then it's stored on your machine. And then there's some things you can do to free up the space again. So.
Hey, Tom.
Yep.
When it comes to backups, do you do testing every so often as to how far back you can retrieve files?
I try to. Time doesn't always allow, unfortunately, but I definitely have restored well over a year in the past. So, it gets less granular the further we go back. It's every 4 hours, let's say, for a week, then it goes to a weekly, then a monthly, then, 6 month roll up. And part of that is, if you haven't realized that you need it in 6 months, you're going to get what you get.
Right. I wanted to ask a question when we were discussing, the multiple ways that people can communicate. Once all this coronavirus stuff is over, are we just going to completely dismantle all of the Zoom and all of the remote meeting capability, and go back to riding horses, or are we going to keep it?
If I were to consult my crystal ball, okay, and that's all it is at this point. I don't know what the governor is going to do with this order or what legislature is going to do. I would say that there's going to be some component of Zoom that's going to remain. Whether it be just instead of dial in for remote participation, where you may still need to have a physical quorum in a room, but if one member needs to do it remotely, well, we'll have this account available. Or on the other side of it, say MTC, and Matt has mentioned this in the past, MTC gets everyone in the room together, but you want to broaden your outreach to maybe engage more of the public that just doesn't have the ability or desire to leave home after a long day at work to come to see a meeting or provide their feedback. Maybe we'll be able to open it up for some level on that. But again, I don't know what the requirements are going to be. I don't know what the appetite is going to be for that type of thing. I do think that once we are able to get back to in-person meeting, I think people are going to want to meet in person. They'll want to abandon Zoom for a while.
I'm not so sure about that.
My experience to date, and it is somewhat flavored by the current situation. So I think it needs more vetting, but the meetings that I've been to online are better attended than the meetings that I go to in person for a number of organizations. So, I don't know what the right answer is, and I certainly don't have any more of a crystal ball than you do, but it does strike me that there could be some benefit towards putting together policies that make it easier for some people to attend this way when necessary. If the result is that we get more people on the committee attending the meetings.
Actually, along that line, my brother has noted something. He has some sight issues too, and he's very active in groups that are reaching out to the visually impaired. And what he says is that, people now can attend meetings who never could have come before, because they would have to get a ride or, someone have to take them or whatever. It would be very difficult. And now they can just pop into a meeting. And, frankly, popping into a meeting has a lot of appeal, simply because you don't have to worry about the travel time to and from. And also, if you're not necessarily at home, you can still get into the meeting. I guess the other issue is, I don't know, what our licensing is like, but, in some respects, Zoom essentially allows for a meeting to be broadcast live in a way that, the SAM can only do at, one meeting at a time.
Yep.
Whereas I think we could probably be broadcasting several meetings live, depending on what our licensing is, and people could pop in and participate or at least listen in much more easily than having to come here or come to a particular site.
So, like I said, I think that it will have some staying power. I don't foresee every meeting being done by Zoom, at least, again, for the Boardy committee members. I think some in-person gathering is going to be more efficient in some cases. It's fine to be able to see everyone on the computer, but there's also another aspect of communication that you don't get by through the screen. So I think, looks like Sam is interested in weighing in.
We'll turn it over to Sam for a comment. Go ahead and unmute yourself, Sam.
Hey guys.
Hey, how's it going, Sam?
Good. Interesting comments about the going forward with Zoom. I'm interested in what I think of as hybrid capacity, in the sense that I think the open meeting requirements are that you have to have a quorum present physically now for others to participate remotely. But it seems to me interesting option to make it easier for people to participate remotely via Zoom going forward through some sort of video display or something in the townhouse meeting room, for example, so people can overcome some of the issues that Will just mentioned, and not because of any visual impairment or whatever, simply because of schedule requirements that make it harder for people to sit in. So I think that could actually open up more participation from committee members, at least at the margins, which I think could potentially be useful. So I've been impressed with the degree of participation people have exhibited through Zoom. I think it's allowed us to get a lot of good things done, but clearly it requires Tom to work 24/7 and create real pressures on the technology. But I hope we can think about some of these things going forward, again, to broaden participation, not only from committee members, but from the public as well, people who might not, for whatever reason, be able or willing to participate in person, to at least have them visually present through the technology going forward in an easier way than we've managed previously. So thanks.
Yeah, thanks for those comments, Sam. Yeah, I completely agree. I believe that for both the participants, the public that might want to participate, it's easier, as well as the committee members. It is just so convenient to not to have to join in person, and especially when a lot of us are busy, if we have traveling for business, and having something like Zoom. First of all, the audio quality is excellent. Having video, now that's now embedded in pretty much every mobile device and laptop, allows for us to see each other and be able to read the nonverbal communication, etc. I worked almost 10 years ago. I worked for VMware for a few years. I was working remotely out of the home office in Utah, but I would frequently go to Palo Alto headquarters. And, of course, when I'm in my home office, I'm just constantly swapping between meetings, meeting upon meeting. The change time between meetings was very small. And so I was hopping between meetings and densely packed schedule. But when I would travel to headquarters in Palo Alto, I felt like my days were like, the productivity dropped like a rock, because I had to walk across campus, which would take, 15, 20 minutes sometimes to get to another meeting room. And physically having to move around versus jump between video conferences was I could definitely see a decrease in my productivity. I do think that, being face to face, there's something to be said about that for some types of discussions still. But I think what Larry, your point was, and I fully agree with this, is there anything we can do or should be doing to encourage powers to be, encourage the town, at least at the town level, how much we can do at the governor's level, but at least the town level, to ensure and promote that, once this thing does open up, that we're not, we don't clamp back down. And I like, Will, your analogy.
Yeah.
we have to abandon the cars, let's go back to horses.
Although I do agree also that if we don't go back to horses, that the model that probably makes the most sense is the hybrid model. And I've certainly had lots of meetings like that where the meeting is scheduled to be in person, but one or two or three people just can't get there. They have time commitments, family commitments, kids that are at home, whatever, but they can attend the meeting by Zoom. I think that if we were to propose that meetings be all online like we are now going forward, there'd be a lot of pushback against that. But the flip side, though, is if we were to put together a proposal, if we want to do that at some point, that says that meetings will go back to being in person. However, members as well as community members, like Sam in this case, can attend through Zoom, because, as Will pointed out, this is much better than broadcasting after the fact on Southborough Access Media.
Yeah.
Also,
I have an extreme example of what this makes possible, and that is that the Massachusetts Commission for the Blind held an open house last Friday, and they had dozens, maybe more than 100 participants. None of those people could have gotten to a physical location, as easily, and it was actually a very productive session. I would say that there might be some other opportunities for us to use it for extending library programs, for instance.
Yeah, so the library is doing that right now. They are doing some online programming like that. Yeah, they've not leaned on the town accounts right now because of the fact that they want to leave it, or actually I've kind of asked that we leave it for the meetings right now, to really feel out what the demand for that is, rather than tying it up. And I'm not trying to dismiss the importance of the library programs, but there was a lot of clamoring for committees to be able to meet again. So that's kind of where we're at. So and to bring this back a little bit, I've actually been asked by the town administrator to participate in basically the reopening task force. How are we going to reopen the town and whatnot. So I will certainly bring the idea of pushing for Zoom to be left in place. And if the governor goes back to the requirements that Sam mentioned of having the physical quorum in place, that's fine, but we can still live stream, even if you have a full quorum or a full committee there. Or, if I think this is a better way to have remote participation than just over the phone anyway. So, so I definitely would advocate. It's really short money for what we get out of it. And I think that, I think everyone is seeing the benefits of it right now.
The one other potential use other than actual committee members is guests. If we would like to have Chief Polis or Karen come to discuss some particular topic, and it's difficult for them to get away for whatever reason, asking them to attend a meeting by Zoom is one way of getting participation from people without imposing on them too heavily. So that's another possible use.
Like 5G consultants, 5G
Or
specialists.
5G consultants that don't live in Massachusetts, for example.
Yeah.
Right.
You're not going to fly them from Chicago to talk to us for an hour, but having them attend by Zoom is definitely
extremely valuable.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we probably should seek some of the people that are believe that 5G is causing COVID, get their opinion. We can have them share with us why they're burning 5G towers.
As far as I can tell.
Yeah.
Sorry, if we can go back real quick to the policy. The other piece that I was reminded that I added was to Will's point. It is in section 4, and it's the second paragraph, if you want to get down there. All email communications pertaining to official duties as municipal employees shall be processed through the town email service. If a user chooses to redirect their incoming email to personal email accounts, all responses must still be composed through the town services. And I stress the must. I could go legalese and say shall. That I'd be open to suggestions on that paragraph.
I mean, I think that's a very good policy. I know that in my case, having the messages forwarded from my town account to my personal account. Well, I live on my personal account, and now I don't miss, messages, and I can actually much more timely in responding.
Right. Yeah. And that's why I put it in there is I do recognize that people have set that up and would like to set it up, and that it makes sense, in some cases to do that for that purpose of, I don't want to bounce between, my personal account, I very rarely actually look at. I get to the point that I go, oh, I have 1,000 messages. I need to delete the, 950 of them because, they're old anyway. So, yeah, I recognize that there's a benefit to it, but I wanted to make sure that there was some language in there that said, you know, if you're going to send an email that pertains to official duties, it needs to go through the town account.
Well, you know, one other quick thing would be, is it possible to set up a rule that forwards a notification to you that you've got a message in your town email rather than actually forwarding the email?
That's a good question. I haven't really looked into it. That's something I could certainly look into.
I mean, that's something
good
that
idea.
banks use quite a bit, you know, or healthcare.
Yeah.
They
Click
send you
here
a
to
message
read,
that
and
you've got a message.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
Yeah. Good point.
so I mean, those are the changes that I made today. That I
So
would be
I do like the
interested to
idea
bring
of
forward.
shall. I do like the must is not
Legal enough.
well. It's not binding.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I've made that change.
Okay. Any other thoughts or comments?
Actually, Tom,
Yep.
just one other question, and that would be, I mean, you know, the whole issue about making certain that you're using town email to leave a record, you know, of town correspondence. That's one area. Is there any other area that you're concerned that people will sort of regularly violate the policy or you know, unwittingly violate the policy on a regular basis?
Sorry, I just saw a double period. Let me go to that. Okay. The only other one that, and this would be an extreme, is the whole unsolicited bulk email. You know, I had the planning board ask the other day for a distribution list that was used for, you know, the COVID notices to send out information about a survey that they're doing. And I said, well, you know what, this policy, the email policy specifically says, you know, distribution lists should only be used for the intended and defined purpose of that distribution list, except in the case of an emergency. So with the COVID situation, we could have, under this policy, used any distribution list that the town had to disseminate information. So what I suggested to the planning board, and I think they did this, was that they use the boards and committees distribution list. So it goes to all members of the boards and committees for a one-time email. Okay. And that email should have then specified to, if you want to continue receiving notifications about this project, go to the eSubscribe page and sign up for the planning board notifications. Because that kind of, it goes around the idea of allowing unsubscribe to that list. But it also, you know, I kind of felt that it was, if it's a one-time thing and you're, you know, it's still serving the town's purpose, that was somewhat acceptable.
I have to say that I'm using the, you know, the notifications quite a bit. And that's also another thing I really like, which is that, you know, now I know that the Board of Selectmen is publishing a minutes or publishing an agenda for a meeting. And that's something that in the past I would have been very difficult to check every day, right?
Right. And that's the whole point of those notifications, is you can subscribe to one, to all, you know, depending on what your interests are in the town. If you know that the selectmen are going to be covering a hot topic, you know, in the next 6 months, you can subscribe to their meeting agendas for 6 months, and then you can unsubscribe once the issue is passed. So that's, users have a lot of control over that.
Has the school board said anything about, you know, distance learning on an ongoing basis?
That I haven't heard anything about that. I'm hoping, as a parent, I'm hoping that it ends in June and does not come back in September. Just it's taking a toll on everyone. You know, from teachers to parents to students, we're all feeling a lot of extra strain, I think, from this sudden shift in methodology. And that's coming from someone who embraces technology. You know, I just don't, you know, there's other impacts besides the learning.
Well, I mean, unfortunately, you know, there's a pretty good bet that this whole thing is going to come back in the fall, and
Right.
you know, we're going to have to go back to some type of, you know, extreme social distancing again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
The
good news
Andrew
is that everything that we've done very quickly and in a very agile way has laid really good foundation for if it does come back. I feel very confident from the technology standpoint that we're ready to act if that were to happen.
Yeah, I was hoping Andrew would be able to join us tonight, but apparently he wasn't able to. So for our next call, I think I'm going to schedule a time when he's definitely available and join us, provide that type of update on the school technology. All right, any other questions or discussions regarding the town email policy? Tom, are you looking for any sort of vote of acceptance?
Yeah, I would appreciate, and I think the selectmen would appreciate a vote of support of or recommendation of the changes, and we can go from there.
Okay, do I have a motion to support the changes as drafted?
I so move to support the changes as drafted.
We have a second.
Second.
Great. Okay, any discussion, any further discussion? Okay, all in favor of approving and supporting the changes to the town email policy as drafted. I need a roll call vote. Will Warren.
Aye.
Larry Sandberg.
Aye.
And I also am in favor. So, yes.
Thank you.
Right.
The selectmen, I believe, will be discussing tomorrow. So if
Great.
you're interested in weighing in, then you can tune into their meeting tomorrow night.
Okay, let's go and move on. A technology status update.
Yep.
Any other technology status updates around the town? One
Yeah.
thing I do want to make sure we touch on, I'd heard a rumor that you made a proposal, Tom, around rewiring of the townhouse.
Yep. Okay. So yes, that was in the capital planning committee, you know, the forecast. So right now, you know, I have two capital items on the forecast. You know, next year, so FY22 is reinvesting in server and storage infrastructure. That one is pretty self-explanatory. We have my tier 2 server is 10 years old. My frontline servers are all 4 years old at this point, all with local storage and whatnot. So we've discussed that in the past. The other one that's just out there for FY23 is the idea of rewiring townhouse. You know, that may not come to fruition as a full project. We may do that as individual offices are redone. That building is, I'd say, 95 to 99% Cat5 cable. And we're wiring the network with fiber, you know, so we're bottlenecking the services to the employees in townhouse. And, you know, I don't see services becoming less data intensive or, you know, less network intensive as we go forward. So I'd like to see us look at rewiring that building to Cat 6 or whatever is the standard. And
So is it Cat 5 or is it Cat 5e?
It's Cat 5. So.
And are you currently running 100 megabit over it, or?
So there are, so like I said, there are some rooms that are Cat 5e, but there's definitely some that's Cat 5 as well. So you know, it is a slower speed in townhouse. You know, I can prove that. So
Does it make sense? My biggest question is, does it make sense to rewire everything with everything? Or does it make sense to do more of a hybrid approach where you do select locations, certainly obviously the servers and access points effectively? I mean, nowadays everything is moving wireless.
right. So the issue with that is that our phones still require hardwire. You know, so there's economies of scale.
They don't require 100 megabits per second or more.
No, not necessarily. So
phones shouldn't. I don't think we should bother upgrading the wiring for phones, because phones are a good 100 megabit per second for phones going to last phones for many more years.
Right. So you know, it would just be economies of scale at that point. You know, the cost of running two cables at the same time is, you know, and actually right now, most of the offices in townhouse are running data through the phone. So the phone plugs into the wall, and then there's a built-in switch in the phone that we connect the workstation to. So that one's still obviously up for discussion. It was out there. I hadn't remembered that I had put that in as a placeholder. I put that one in a couple of years ago.
What is the cost?
I think what I had discussed with the facilities manager was 60,000, which I don't think is going to be what it would actually cost for the number of places we would need in there. So
yeah, I'd like to get to Larry and Will's comments on this, but I would be much stronger in favor of, let's wire a couple of ports per floor, get some really nice Wi-Fi devices in there, run gigabit or 10 gig, you know, through Cat 6 to those. And, you know, nowadays with these Wi-Fi devices, you can have, you know, the MIMO and multiple concurrent streams on the same channel, and you can.
Right.
The real question though is, are the PCs, do the wireless interfaces in the PCs, for example, support AC or Wi-Fi 6 or anything like that? Because, you know, if they're 8-year-old PCs and they're still, you know, 802.1n, 11n or whatever, then you know, you're not going to achieve an improvement in bandwidth by having a really nice Wi-Fi infrastructure.
Right. So the idea of 8-year-old workstations won't happen under my watch. I can't do that. You know, I think my oldest workstations now are 5 years old, and that's, you know, counter machines that have been handed down from someone else. So I try to keep employees at a 4-year replacement right now. And with the current situation, I've actually updated my replacement plan for next year to be 99% laptops. You know, there's a couple desktops that just don't make sense to replace with laptops. And really that is under the understanding that we probably will end up in this type of situation again, whether it's a major storm or another outbreak. You know, I was only able to get 24 people working from home on a Windows laptop. Now I'll be able to, next year, that number will be closer to 50, you know, the following year, 75, you know, so.
How many total employees do we have that work in the townhouse?
In the town offices or in townhouse?
In townhouse overall.
Townhouse, let me see. We're on the order of, I want to say around 20 or so. But, you know, we do have the meetings there and whatnot. So
yeah, certainly for the legacy PCs, if we need to add a Wi-Fi card because they need better connectivity, I'd still be much more favored that than rewiring to them, because we're talking about $3,000 per employee just for Cat 6 cabling.
Right. And like I said, that was a number that was just thrown out by the facilities manager and myself, and kind of eyeballing things. And as offices are being redone, they are pulling new cables you know, the staff electrician is pulling a couple cables while he's there, basically. So, you know, it very well may work itself out that it comes right off that budget request. But, you know, again, it's a placeholder for discussion, and I had to start somewhere. Yeah.
Tom, can you just go back to the previous topic for a second on
Yep.
the town server?
Yep.
Is that just a single server that's in the town hall now or something else?
No, so
Get the context.
yep. So we currently run, I have 4 VM hosts. Okay. 3 of them are frontline. They have everyday applications. The 4th one has a couple archived applications in there. It's there if I absolutely need to migrate something over. And then we have the 2 backup servers. So in an ideal world and the discussions I've had to get some budgetary numbers, you know, I would go down to 3 hosts that were capable of any 2 of them running the full load of the town.
You're at 6 now, 4 plus 2?
No, well, if you count the 2 backup servers, the backup storage. But as far as the production, you know, that's 4 physical servers. You know, I'd like to get that down to 3, where they have the capacity of 2 of them of handling the entire load. So that would allow me to shift either for planned maintenance, shift the load off of 1 and do all the maintenance I need to and cycle through, or in the event of a hardware failure, I could maintain service levels for the entire town while waiting for repair on the one down. So, and that would also include shifting from direct attached storage on those 4 servers to centralized storage, either on a SAN or whatever the technology at the time is going to be.
What did you budget? I assume you spec'd it out. What specific SAN or NAS device you're looking for? Is that right?
Yeah. So we did some just discussions with Dell, and they came back with a number that's higher than I'm really comfortable with at this point. But I also know that number will most likely shrink as we do diverge into using OneDrive for our storage. You know, moving some of the looking at other services that we can move to cloud-based. You know, it will reduce our footprint both on processing and also on storage. So
what's the quote? What did they quote you?
It came back at close to 90.
Wow.
All in for, you know, with the switches for the connectivity. So, you know, there's definitely some places to shave that number down. So
would you mind sharing that quote with me?
Yep.
Like I say, I used to work for VMware. And related question, have you looked into vSAN? Have you looked into?
I have not too much.
So,
Let me backtrack on that just a bit. When I attended a training, I did go over that with them. You know, so it's definitely something that I'd look into. My concern is, and it's a matter of educating myself on it. And I just want to make sure that we don't run into a situation where if a physical box goes down, that, you know,
yeah, and that's precisely what this is what's called hyper-converged. You attach your disk to each of the boxes, and as long as you have a quorum of systems available, the hosts are acting effectively as your distributed SAN. So you're replicating blocks between the hosts, but because of the ultra low cost of local storage, it becomes much more cost effective and actually very scalable as well.
Yeah. So the number that I put forward for capital planning committee was actually 60, I believe. So that's the number I would like to get closer to. And when I had my discussions with them, I specifically said, look, I can't tell you what the actual infrastructure is going to look like 2 years from now. You know, it's just not reasonable. So, you know, it was a discussion point. It's definitely something that I want to vet a little bit more, or not even a lot more over the next the next year before really going before them with, hey, this is our next year request, and this is why we need to do this.
Okay, so these numbers are not for this coming year, is that correct?
Correct, correct. It's for
Okay.
fiscal 22 and 23.
Hey, Tom,
Yep.
you know, we seem to be putting a lot of bets on OneDrive.
Yeah.
And, you know, OneDrive, if I recall correctly, was, you know, something that Microsoft threw in as a way to suck people into, getting away from buying Office on their desktop and going to a subscription model. And my concern is, I mean, is there anything that would keep Microsoft from suddenly saying, hey, by the way, you know, we're going to be raising the price of OneDrive and shrinking the amount of storage and, you know, all that good stuff.
No, I don't think there's anything preventing them except for
market competition.
Yeah.
I mean, every other vendor is dropping their prices, and
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
but there's a lot of competition out there.
Yeah, but you know, to tell you the truth, I mean, OneDrive is when I look at other competitors, I see OneDrive as being very easy to use, very convenient to use. It interoperates with Microsoft Office Suite very well. You know, I've got Google Drive, and I don't use that nearly as much as I do OneDrive.
Mm-hmm. So
I'm on the opposite side. I use Google Drive much more than I do a OneDrive. And I don't know if you noticed that Google Suite now has offered in-place editing of Excel docs. So effectively, you don't have to convert it to a Google Sheet or a Google or a Word doc. You can in-place edit. You know.
Yeah. So in short, you know, Microsoft can do whatever they want. You know, they could turn around and say, you know, it's going to be $1,000 a year now. However, the fact is that they have to know that everyone is ready and willing to jump to Google, and Google would probably turn around and say, all right, we're going to slash our price just to make sure that you come on over. So,
well, I understand what you're saying, and I agree with it. But, you know, on the other hand, Microsoft, if they have enough people that will pay $10, you know, $5 a month or $2 a month, that's a hell of a lot of extra money that they could be pulling in.
Yep. So you know, every choice that we make is going to, you know, have that same type of question. You know, is it cost effective, or is it more cost effective to, or, you know, if we run into this situation again, you know, is it better to have 100 people trying to connect to the single VPN to access their files, or, you know, they're accessing their files using Microsoft's, you know, stressing Microsoft's network as opposed to ours. So
no,
you know,
I understand what you're saying. I guess the one point I'd make is, and I can't think of the specific example, but let's say Facebook, for instance. One reason that Facebook continues to dominate the world is that there is no easy way to migrate your stuff to somewhere else. Right. And I think that's true with Microsoft OneDrive. There's not really an easy way. I mean, you can go to Google, but it's kind of a chunk of learning curve that a lot of people don't want to go through.
Yep. So, yeah. So I don't have a solid answer for that question. Yeah. So
it's something let's definitely keep an eye on moving forward, especially get towards next year. We should definitely look very hard. I mean, especially if we're talking about, you know, coming fiscal years, about upgrading or replacing on-prem infrastructure versus leveraging cloud services. It's definitely a strong conversation we should have.
Yep.
So
okay.
Okay.
Moving on, just real quick, updates on other projects. The fiber project to expand to DPW, Art Center, and Cemetery Admin. The grant funds have been received. The network equipment was ordered and received and configured today at my house. The contractor to run the cable is on emergency work only, given COVID. So as soon as everything is cleared for him to start working, or for the company to start working again. They will get us scheduled, and I'll be ready to go for that. DPW. Good.
Could you remind us of the path of those lines?
Yep, that is going to, so when we ran down for the radio tower at EMC, they ran extra pairs down to Route 9. So they'll come up Route 9, up the ramp onto 85 to DPW, and I think down, I think it's Middle Road. They'll go that way to go down to the Art Center.
Where does it cross Route 9? At 85?
Just south, no, just west of 85. Sorry, I had to think about my orientation. So I think it's Middle Road.
Huh.
So this is a run that comes from Public Safety Building,
Correct.
goes to the radio antenna at EMC,
Yep.
and then across
No.
down to DPW.
So it'll branch off. It branches off down to the radio tower, and comes. So at that point, it'll go up to DPW.
And then from
Basically,
DPW, it goes to the Art Center.
Either that way, or it will continue down Middle Road to the Art Center. And I think it's down Middle Road, and that actually brings us closer to one of the schools if we ever tie in that way too.
Got it.
Hey, Tom,
Yeah.
Along the lines of this, I know that some of your projects, at least in past years, have been ones where, you know, it was a cutover from one thing to another to save money.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're, you know, in this delaying town meeting situation. Is there anything where you're in danger of not being able to you know, to complete a project that would save us money, and so it's going to end up costing us money because the town meeting postponement?
I don't think so at this point. So because the fiber is funded through a grant, that money is available. So that's why I'm able to do that as soon as the contractor is available. It'll be done. So there won't be a theoretical delay on that. You know, we just run through these quick projects that we have going on. DPW radio upgrades for their vehicles. The FCC license was obtained before COVID, and the vendor has ordered the equipment, and we're waiting for it to be shipped from Motorola. So again, that might have a little bit of delay depending on impact Motorola might be having on any supply chain. But that one's ongoing. Youth and family software, it was ordered, configured, at least the server was set up. The director of youth and family is working to do the software configuration. We do still need to work on some HIPAA documentation just to cover ourselves.
This is a HIPAA compliant server. Is this like a server? Is that right?
Yeah, so it's
Dedicated
scheduling.
server
I think
for-
it's primarily for their scheduling, but there's just some documentation that we just need to put together. You know, a physical access limitations. You know, things like that. So
where's that server going to be located?
It's part of the virtual servers, so it is physically located at public safety behind multiple locked doors, you know, access control, all that. So it's going to be fairly easy to write those documents. It's just a matter of doing it. So I have some templates to go off of. So again, that may be an area that I'll reach out for some help on. And
do we need to have an independent auditor?
I don't believe so. But again, I'm in the process of reviewing all that documentation at this point of what the requirements are.
Hey, Tom, just, you know, one question. What is our plan if you should fall ill?
That is a very good question.
I mean, are you one thing that I put together for my children's sake is what I fondly call death instructions, which is that, you know, I wrote up all the things I could think of so that if they had to take over, that they wouldn't be completely out to lunch there.
Yeah, I keep coming back to it. I periodically do a little bit of work on an operations manual.
I'm not seeing it as a manual. I'm seeing it as more of a, maybe even sort of a stream of consciousness kind of thing where, if suddenly somebody had to pick up from you,
Right.
they could open one document, and it doesn't have to be in a manual. It doesn't have to be a step-by-step.
No,
But it would be good to say, here are all the irons I have in the fire, and these are the irons that you need to be looking at if I'm gone for a while.
Yeah. That's kind of what I was looking at. And actually, I guess continuity of operations is probably a better title for the document than operations manual, but that's the concept that I was going for. It's just, time is time, and it keeps marching and things keep popping up. So to that end, I'm hoping that the part-time position is going to survive any potential budget cuts, and that will free up some time for some of that administrative stuff. And in the meantime, I know I definitely need to keep that documented.
Yeah, but as I said, I would not spend a lot of time formatting it or making it pretty. But for instance, one thing I put in my document was just, well, here's where I store everything. This subject I store over there, and this subject I store over here. And fortunately, I have things in relatively centralized locations. But that would be extremely helpful, rather than someone having to, come in and try and poke around and say, well, where did he put all this stuff?
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, I'll certainly add that to my list.
It shouldn't be something that takes a lot of your time. It should be as terse as you can make it, that it's still effective. But it's just something that, unfortunately, if we were to lose you, we would, we'd be out of luck unless we had something that would sort of at least point us in the right direction and where to look for the most important things you're doing, and et cetera.
Yeah.
I agree, although I also believe it's important to have the documentation for the actual infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
I think the irons in the fire are certainly critical if something were to happen and somebody needed to take over right now. But all of the other things, where are the servers? What's on the servers? How are the servers configured? Where's the fiber run? Where's the fiber terminated?
You know what? That's an excellent point, and I would be glad to volunteer to actually write that up and put that together so that it's not something that falls on Tom. I think very much that that's exactly something that we should be doing, especially from the standpoint that Tom is constantly moving pieces of infrastructure in and out and replacing them, and I think that it would be very good if we have some type of documentation, not only of what our current situation is, but what Tom is saying. Okay, here's the stuff the deals that I'm working to bring in new technology or move out old technology, right? And I would certainly be willing to volunteer to spend time on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. And, I think that just enumerating the technology areas, I could see effectively, let me say metaphorically, a loose leaf binder with dividers that says, okay, here's our server infrastructure, here's our fiber infrastructure, here's our services infrastructure, email, storage, whatever. So the guy who comes in the day after Tom dies will have one set of documents that say, here are all the irons in the fire right now that you're going to have to deal with tomorrow. But then here's the book that covers all of the infrastructure that we've put in over the last 10 years, so that when when somebody says, where is our email served from? It's easy to find that.
Yeah.
So
I worry about credentials and credential governance. Hopefully you're using some sort of password manager.
Yes.
Okay.
Basically, a technology continuation plan.
Right.
Sort.
So
sounds useful.
And
worth paying for.
So, and again, this comes back to the new tools that are available. Through Microsoft Teams, we have wikis available. So, I started populating that with, I just had to update 2 new cruisers, the laptops in there. So I had to search for the document on how to do that. Well, I went through it in a wiki now so that it's available. So,
That's great.
with the idea of, again, hopefully I'm bringing on a part-time staff person, I can then say, all right, go study this area, go check out the wiki and poke around and see what's.
And that's what's critical is that all of that knowledge handoff for that
Right.
part-time. This is a great opportunity to say, don't just hand off things verbally.
Right.
Anytime you hand off anything, it should be handed off
In
through
writing.
documentation in writing, and
Yep.
that person's just reviewing. If that person has any questions, it should be either you or that person should document it at that time. So it's
Update
yeah,
the documentation.
exactly.
Yeah. Yep.
Looks like we have a comment from Sam. I'm gonna let him talk. Go ahead and unmute yourself, Sam, if you want to.
Thanks, guys. Quick comment. This, I think, is an excellent thing to do. One observation I'd make is given Tom's time pressure, I've certainly felt a lot of that myself. What I've used in the past for this is used a video recording to at least start the process, to sit down. I find it a heck of a lot easier to talk about it than to sit down and write something as a first step. And so, Tom, if you had an opportunity to spend 30 minutes in front of the video recorder saying, here are the kind of things that I think are important and sort of the top list of things to do, that might be a useful way to start. I mean, obviously you need to figure out what works best for you, but at least that's helped me not only organize my thoughts for subsequent writing, but to create a record that should I get hit by a bus immediately, there is at least some record of what I think is important and guidelines for people where to look, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know, whatever
Sam,
works for you guys.
I think that's an excellent point. What I would say is that maybe we could do that in 2 steps. And one is that Tom could, record these little vignettes of whatever is on his mind and what he wants to, to tell us. And maybe, then I could come along and look at it and maybe write it up, or at least generate questions if there are things to me that, I say, well, I'm not sure that people would necessarily know what you're assuming that they might know here, right?
Good. That sounds great. And if Tom starts having a fever and shortness of breath, you can accelerate that process.
And while we're sitting here discussing Tom's imminent death, are there any other topics related to that?
What songs would you like at the funeral?
Well, actually, I'm pretty certain, considering what Tom does for us, that he would only be down for the count for about 3 days, and then
Good.
he would roll the stone away, and there he'd be.
I've been told I'll get paid double if I fall ill and continue working. So
great. Anyway, the concept I think is extremely powerful and
Yes.
valuable. So if there are ways that can accelerate or short circuit some of that to get something in place, I think that'd be very valuable, and we'll hope for the best. Thank you.
Yeah.
thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. Yeah, and obviously anything we could do as a committee, if reviewing documents.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
so one thing that would possibly work. I will say I absolutely hate recording myself. I don't know if anyone had a chance to watch the video tutorial I did on Zoom meetings, but that was the better half of 4 hours of me going through and go, nope, don't like that, and having to redo it. But to have a conversation, let's pick a topic and have a conversation.
It should be an interview.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would probably be even more beneficial from my standpoint. And I'm definitely open to conversations,
And actually, that's the key point here, Tom, is it should be convenient from your standpoint.
Yeah.
Something that gets it done maybe in a very ugly way or very, kind of loosey-goosey way, but at least, we're making progress on it.
Yep.
And it's not taking a lot of your time.
Yeah. And again, it may even just raise questions that I have to respond with. I will get back to you, and that's, the exact path of the fiber, for example, I can get that, the company has exactly what pole numbers they're attached to. I just need to reach out and get it, I have a general idea of how it runs, but they can provide the exacts, things like that. So.
Well,
this brings up a question of, I mean, formally, we not only the process documented, but also the configuration documented.
Correct.
This is what's known as the CMDB, Configuration Management Database or Inventory
Yep.
System. So we just formalize what that looks like. If that looks like it's in a OneDrive wiki, fine. Yep. If it's in a mixture of documents, but as long as it has a good structure, and I'm not proposing we adopt something like a beast of a system like ServiceNow, but formal large companies have very good configuration management databases of understanding configuration of every item, right?
Right. So
actually, Tom, one thing that I put in my own instructions was just I went through all of the different entities that I deal with and just had a brief note as to, well, here's what I get from this firm.
Yep.
Here's my relationship with this firm, so that if someone had to pick up,
Yep.
they would be able to say, oh, yeah, I've got to go and call these people or whatever.
Yeah,
That's what I'm going to call them about.
I've had most of that in place for the better part of 3 years now. From the first time I took a vacation, it was, here's who you call if X, Y, and Z, needs to be updated, but it's definitely there,
No, I think that's great. I mean, this is not to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah, no.
And it's certainly going to be pretty ugly, but if we can get something done quickly as a first draft,
Yep.
And then we can apply. People can look at it and maybe come back and say, could we beef up this area or could we reorganize this? But just something that you wouldn't feel that everything necessarily that you would suddenly have to, go into a 45-hour session to tell us everything that you know.
Right.
Maybe we can pick out a little of that along the way.
Yep. Sounds good.
Being sort of a top-down kind of person, I guess, I would settle for a starting point just being the table of contents or what the loose leaf dividers are, because our off-the-cuff choice of what's the most important thing to document might be ignoring something that's actually more important, but since we haven't actually looked at the entire list, we don't know. So
absolutely.
I always like to start with an outline or a table of contents, just where I want to fill in first.
Well, and then the other thing about that table of contents is that we can then prioritize, right?
Exactly.
Okay, let's go ahead and move on. So it sounds like, just to close that, it sounds like next steps on that is you'll schedule some time with Tom.
Yeah,
we'll do
a
recorded interview chat.
Yep.
Great.
Okay. The only other big update I have, I don't know if you guys have been following the budget situation, but all the departments have been asked to prepare what would equate to a total budget of 0 tax increase this year and 2% tax increase. Now that does not mean level funded for the IT department, does not, so, the way it was distributed, it was reductions of about 14,000 and 4,500 respectively, the 0% and 2%. Neither model that I presented back removed the part-time hours that I had requested. Some of the savings were, with the fiber going in, we have internet service reductions, employee training would take a hit in both of those. So it's not without pain, but I was able to maintain most of the levels of service. And as I mentioned earlier, make a shift to do laptops instead of desktops for most of the replacements.
So you were asked to do a 0% and a 2%?
So again, it's the overall tax impact of 0% increase year over year and 2%. So
not department by department.
Correct. The percentage was distributed somehow across all the departments, I think, as a percentage of the budget. So my impact. When I first saw it, I said, oh, the 0%, well, there goes that part-time employee. And oh, by the way, there's no contracted services for backup of when I'm on vacation or sick. So, but that was not the case. So, so I was able to do it not pain-free, but not as painful as it could be. So all this will obviously depend on what happens with town meeting and what the appetite of tax impact and whatnot is going to be.
Would you mind sharing those proposals with us?
Sure, I can do that. Do you want me to do them now or?
Not right now. No.
Okay, I'll send them
after the meeting.
what I'll do is I'll send you the I had to do a little cover sheet of the impact. So, and it's a summary of the lines that I targeted. You know, and we're bottom line budget. So if things got shifted around, it's still.
But you were able to maintain the extra person.
Correct.
Okay.
Actually, I have a question. I mean, a lot of the income of the town, or the tax income, is based on property tax, right?
I don't know. I don't have that information as to what percentage of income comes from what. So.
Well, I have to believe that property values are in free fall right at the moment, simply because, you know, people aren't necessarily going to be moving and buying houses.
So there's a difference between your assessed value and a market value. The assessed value is very rarely, as I understand it, near the market value. So the assessed value is pretty stable. You know, I think they just did a reevaluation, and Sam can probably speak more to it as a former member of advisory and current member of selectmen.
Sam, do you want to have a comment on this, Sam? Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, quick one. Good question, Will. In fact, the current tax stuff is based on values early from 2019. So that is the assessed value. So there's a lag there. It's certainly going to have an impact going forward, but near-term impact, at least in terms of the property tax bills that are currently due, is not something we're going to feel much at this point. Now, that not to say that there may not be people who have difficulty paying the taxes, so actual revenue collected might not come up to the full expectation. But
well, there's the other issue that the state is in free fall with their revenues too, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And you know, the Liberate Southborough movement might, you know, come in and start demanding you know, a reassessment earlier than what we might count on, right?
Potentially, and I think we already had faced some challenges in the 22, 23, 24 fiscal years, simply because of the public safety building coming online before the school debt had rolled off as much as would have been ideal from the perfect scenario. So I think that you're right. There are going to be challenges going forward. Again, I think the consensus seems to be we're not going to feel it for FY21 as much here, but we've got to think about it going forward. The advisory and selectmen are both looking at what we do to ease the crunch down the road.
Okay.
Okay, sounds good. So Tom, you'll share with us the current proposals just for our review after the meeting.
Yes.
So I know we're pretty much out of time. We didn't get to any discussion of this technology use surveys / strategic technology plan, but for everybody's knowledge, it sounds like town meeting is going to be like very abbreviated, pretty much only approving a budget, my understanding, and that all other articles can be deferred to meeting later this year or something like that.
Just for a little bit of clarity on that, town meeting floor will make that ultimate decision. I know the selectmen are going to be discussing what they target as priorities. The moderator has some ideas of what he thinks is priorities, but ultimately town meeting floor is going to decide whether or not they want to postpone any articles. You know, town meeting floor can choose that we, you know, vote on every single article, have robust discussion on every single article. Again, my crystal ball is saying that there will be as much appetite to get in and out as quickly as possible. But, you know, who knows? You know, presentations may be a little bit limited. We're not sure yet.
Okay.
All right. Anything else then for tonight? I think it covers most of our topics on our agenda. We didn't get to schools or library, but yeah, go ahead, Mary.
Yeah.
Should pick a date for the next meeting.
That would be good. So let's pull up calendars. So I think we had initially been targeting the third Tuesday of every month in the evening.
Mm-hmm.
So that means it would be on the 19th of this month.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to get back into regular cadence, especially now that we have virtual meetings. It should be easier to do so. Would the third Tuesday of this month, basically a couple weeks from now, be too soon? Would that be okay?
That'd be okay with me,
I think
as long as it's in the evening.
Yeah, I think we've got a lot to talk about. So getting back into sync and having on the 19th of May makes sense.
Okay. Tom, does that work with your schedule?
It should right now.
Okay.
I don't see any other meetings scheduled for that time. So if you got to request the room as soon as you can, then we'll get it blocked out.
Okay.
7 p.m., right?
At 7 to 9 p.m. In fact, it should be on each of your calendars already.
Yep.
Oh, looks like the Board of Selectmen have the remote public room that night.
Oh, the public. All right. So sorry, I was looking at the other one. You are correct. So you could do the non-public comment one and still have a meeting.
Okay, let me do that. Okay, I will update my existing meeting invite with that meeting room and go and reserve it. Okay. I love Outlook room reservations, having to play the phone game between different. Yeah, this is good.
And there's the request. I will deal with that probably tomorrow at this point.
Hey, Tom, I'll get in touch with you tomorrow and we can set up some time.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Okay. You can just send me an email or.
Yeah, I'll send you an email.
Okay. All right.
And actually, what I would, Larry and Matt, if you guys, that table of contents, if you have anything that you think should be in that table of contents and want to just jot it down in an email and send it to me, that'd be great.
Okay.
Great. I'm glad to. Thanks. We'll do. Okay. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I move adjournment.
I second.
Okay, need a roll call vote. Larry?
Aye.
Will?
Aye.
And I support as well. Thank you, everyone.
Great.
Have a great night, and we'll talk in a couple weeks.
Have a good night.
Okay. Thank you.